No, you turn it this way though, please.
Can you switch to video, please, real quick?
Especially with media involvement and just so many different narratives out there. And the ones involved would like to be able to share exactly where we are and how we got here. And so as folks know, Augusta, Richmond County has been working with Gold Cross EMS for quite some time now to provide emergency services to Augusta, Richmond County. They've received a set number of subsidies throughout the years, but the current MOU that they've been under expired in December of 2022. And it was at that time to where we knew that there was going to have to be an opportunity for us to come to the table and decide how to move forward with Gold Cross having their subsidy and with the people of Augusta, Richmond County having the critical care that they need by way of ambulatory care. And so I want to just kind of walk through a little timeline as to how we got to where we are, because throughout this entire process, myself and some of the commissioners behind me have been subjected to threats, have been subjected to bully tactics, and quite frankly, it's bad politics, and the truth should be told. We have been presented with a contract by way of Commissioner Brandon Garrett to, as far as the contract goes for Gold Cross, was presented to us by Commissioner Brandon Garrett a few hours before the commission meeting. There was a conversation about a new contract that was drafted that this government did not authorize. You may know that in 2022, around the summer, we authorized our staff to go to the table to draft a contract with Gold Cross, and that contract negotiation, it happened. Well, at our January 9th committee meeting, a contract was put forward and it went through a wrong committee. It came through the Public Safety Committee as an addendum item, and not through the appropriate committee, which is Administrative Services. At our January 17th meeting, the same contract came before us again, and it caught many of us by surprise. The contract had not come into our understanding until 3 hours before the vote was to take place. And just as we said on the commission floor, that we did not have enough opportunity to look at this contract to decide exactly what was in it, to decide if it was fiduciary responsible for the citizenship, or if it even made legal sense. We did not have that opportunity. Apparently, a commissioner worked with a private vendor on a contract that we were expected to vote on before the meeting. In that contract, contrary to what Augusta Richmond County was asking for, Gold Cross was only willing to give Augusta Richmond County 8 ambulances, 1 QRV vehicle. They needed a 180-day grace period to be able to provide these services. They did not support a performance bond, and they wanted a $1.9 million subsidy and a $2 million upfront fee to implement services that we still to this day don't know what those services are. That did not happen. That motion failed that day during the commission meeting. And after that motion failed, Commissioner Bobby Williams, who you'll hear from here shortly, asked our staff, or asked the commission and the mayor at the time, to allow for negotiations to continue. That never came to a vote. A motion was never made. As a matter of fact, Commissioner Williams was blown off and the meeting was adjourned. Well, the following meeting on January 24th, that same contract came back before commissioners again. And I stated specifically that I had no issue with Gold Cross, that this conversation has never been about Gold Cross, but it has always been an issue with transparency and accountability in mind. We've all stated from time and time again that if Gold Cross was asking for $1.9 million one day and 1.4 a few months before and 1.7 at the last minute, with no financial proof, with no sense of urgency to show where the financial hardship is, which I'm absolutely positive that they had it, but they never showed us the records. When the small business community came before the city of Augusta to ask for assistance during the COVID-19 pandemic, we asked of everything for them for $7,500. And now we're talking about close to $4 million with no type of financial record, no type of tracking mechanisms in our ambulances, nothing but a dollar amount and a demand. In that meeting, this contract failed yet again. It failed yet again. But before that contract failed again, I made the motion for Gold Cross employees to sit down with city staff to negotiate a contract that made sense both legally and financially. And that motion failed 5-5, with 5 commissioners voting to have negotiations, as we should have, and 5 commissioners voting against further negotiations. And the mayor broke the tie to not have negotiations. Well, what happened? Gold Cross gave the zone back up, something that they simply did not have to do. And then that night, everyone got on TV and said that there was no plan. There was no plan for ambulatory care, that if your loved ones for some reason fell or needed ambulatory care, they wouldn't got it. They would not have gotten it, which has never been true. Not even once had it ever been true. Gold Cross surrendered the zone after the body made a decision to not pass a contract that was borderline illegal, and after a tie-breaking vote to have negotiations failed. Well, the following day, a special call meeting was had in which this same contract came before us again. A contract that at the previous day was written with Gold Cross as the service provider. In this current meeting, the 25th meeting, we did not have the legal ability to pass a contract giving Gold Cross any dollar, any type of mutual service here, simply because the contract was written with Gold Cross as the service provider in mind. Simple as that. And it was at this meeting where our hands were forced to go into negotiations. We came out of that meeting with Gold Cross on a month-to-month to give us service until the state of Georgia was able to provide us with quality care. We voted on that unanimously. The agreement was that Gold Cross would receive $250,000 their first month of service and $150,000 each month after, until we were able to get a permanent service provider in place. And if I'm not even mistaken, maybe not even 24 hours later, there was a 4-car accident on Deansbridge Road to where victims of that accident waited 3 hours for an ambulance, and the victims laid on the side of the road waiting for them, not even 24 hours later. It was also at this meeting where the RFP process was discussed in detail. Actually, the motion stated that we would go out, we would have the services sought after with the procurement code in mind. And I only mention that because some folks questioned whether or not we even gave authorization for an RFP to even begin. And so fast forwarding now until the February 9th meeting, to where the process concluded. What we asked our staff to do was concluded. They went to the table in such a short amount of time because this body couldn't get it together. They went at a short amount of time to do what we asked of them to do, and the contract for AmeriPro was voted against for whatever reason. Now you're looking at a company who was willing to give Augusta 16 emergency response vehicles almost immediately at a price lower than what Augusta could even have bargained for. Almost immediately. But again, the contract was voted against. It went unheard once again. Here's the problem that we have. The problem that we have is that politics has taken over this conversation about quality care in Augusta, Richmond County. We keep hearing reports about there not being ambulance care, and we're not going to be able to apply for zones, and all this rhetoric and jargon. When in fact, every meeting since we began this conversation, the commissioners that you see before you now have been at the table trying to make this work for Augusta, Richmond County, trying to make sure that ambulatory care was a permanent reality, for Augusta, Richmond County. The latest conversation is now, well, Augusta didn't apply for the zone. Why didn't Augusta apply for the zone? We didn't apply for the zone because we didn't have a permanent provider, which on February 9th, we could have had a permanent provider. That vote again went 5-5. 5 commissioners voted to go forward with the new provider. 5 commissioners voted not to go forward with the new provider, with the mayor breaking the tie to not go with the new provider. Still leaving Augusta, Richmond County in the same position that we started. And then the following day, the special call meeting, which everyone is asking, well, why didn't you show up? Why didn't you show up? Well, we didn't show up to the special call meeting simply because some of us have other obligations that we were not able to get out of. As you see today, there are 2 commissioners absent. One commissioner still fulfilling that obligation that she couldn't get out of, and another commissioner who also does not have the luxury of being full-time retired or having nothing else to do. There are obligations that we are obligated to meet that we are not able to give, that we are not able to respond to short notices of special call meetings. But even when those special call meeting notices came out as the public received that information, we all responded via email that we could not go. I said in the beginning of my statements that this entire process has lacked transparency. It has lacked accountability. We've even had city staff come before us and say that commissioners ought to stay out of the way, that commissioners ought to let them do their jobs. And that's what we have attempted to do. You know, there's an old saying that when you have the law on your side, you pound the law. When you have the facts on your side, you pound the facts. But if you have neither or, you pound the table. And all you've been hearing over the last few weeks is just folks pounding on the table, because what staff is telling them is not what they want to hear. Because what's coming back in city-sanctioned processes is not the results that some want. And this is the part that frustrates me the most. We can take the rhetoric. We can take being called idiots on Facebook. We can talk being called crooks on Facebook. We can take being called everything but a child of God on Facebook. In those comments and everyone's media outlets, we're called everything but child of God. You need to follow the law. And then when we do that, we get vilified. But we can take that. But when city staff begins to get bullied, when city staff begins to get thrown under the bus, even to the point to where folks who are not saying what others want to hear are having their jobs hung over their head, we have city employees calling, afraid because they're thinking they're going to get fired for simply doing what the commission asked them to do. That is a wrong type of politics that we should disavow, that we should not accept, and we should accept at no point in time. Now, we also understand here that we're going to be subjected to some media scrutiny. We're going to be subjected to some bad Facebook posts. We're going to be subjected to some risk, and that's okay, because standing up for the people of Augusta is a risk that we are always going to be willing to take. Because at the end of the day, the only people who will not benefit, the only people who will feel the sting of this bad politics and of this stink politics that we spoke of this past week will be the people of Augusta, mostly in the inner city, who have not received quality ambulatory care. The elderly woman who waits 2 hours for the ambulance to come pick her up. The football player at a high school who waits for an ambulance to come pick them up when they're injured at a game. For people standing on street corners, right, waiting for ambulances to come and get them after an incident has happened. They're the ones that's going to feel this sting. And so my plea today is simply this. We need ambulatory care, long-term ambulatory care in the city of Augusta. We don't have time for the political games. We don't have time for the political back and forth. If you care about the city of Augusta and the people of Augusta as much as you say that you do, pass the contract, vote on it, and stop playing with people's lives. Life and death is literally at stake, and we will not stand by and allow politics to get in the way of progress. And so with that, I'd like to pass the podium down to my colleague from the 5th, Commissioner Bobby Williams, for some comments, and then the Commissioner from the 2nd, Commissioner Stacy Pulliam, for some comments, and then I will come back and we will take just a few questions. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good morning, or good evening, or good afternoon. I can only pretty much reiterate what Commissioner Johnson has just said to you. He pretty much covered the whole process from beginning to end. The major thing that we really need to emphasize is that we authorized the contract to be negotiated by our attorney and our administrator. That was done. But as he said, we came to a meeting and we had another contract that was put on the table that was not authorized. We actually voted on that one, but we stopped at the next meeting because we were asking who authorized anybody to do another contract or negotiation with Gold Cross. Well, I'd just like to say Gold Cross has been with us a long time, but they're not serving us well. I get so many calls about people on the side of the road being left there for 2 hours. I got a call about the lady who died over at Kroger. I got another call today about a lady had a stroke or something over at Mercedes-Benz place and having, waited for an ambulance for 2 hours and them having to carry the lady to the hospital who eventually had emergency surgery. The car wreck on Deans Bridge Road, and they said there were people praying for the person who had been hit, and somebody else came along and hit them again, and the ambulance still hasn't shown up after a couple of hours or so. So those are the people that I'm fighting for. My sister-in-law who had a stroke and had to wait for an ambulance for over an hour. So we are fighting for those folks. And I don't have a problem with awarding a contract or giving somebody some money or what have you, but you need to make sure that you're doing the service for the people in Augusta, Georgia. Gold Cross is not serving us well. If they were, I would have no problem. But you want to give us a $1.9 million demand for supplement, and then you wanted another $2 million within 30 days. I'm trying to figure out where the city's going to get $4 million in a matter of a few days. So it's just something that we need to make sure that we take into account, because you're asking for an astronomical amount of money, and I don't know where we're going to get it from in the future. Maybe we'll have to raise taxes. I don't know, but it just needs to be a service that we can count on. We had AmeriPro on the table, 16 vehicles, 13 ambulances, tracking services, I think they said they had 3 different tracking services, QRV vehicles, quick response vehicles. They were going to bring those. Gold Cross wanted 2 or 3 for about another $500,000 or so. I just don't see it, not at all. We need to get people in gear. We need to get a contract. We need to get a service. We don't know what's going to happen because we really weren't able to apply for the zone because, we couldn't get an agreement. The mayor said he wanted a vote. It was 5-5. He had an opportunity to vote it up or vote it down. He voted it down. It doesn't seem like it is service that we're looking at for the people of Augusta. We're looking at service to Gold Cross or something or what have you. If you were doing what's right, I would have no problem. I've told the mayor that. If you're doing what's right, I don't have a problem. I pass the podium on to Commissioner Pulliam.
Good afternoon, everyone. I also would like to say that I totally agree with the timeline that was presented by Commissioner from the 1st, Commissioner Johnson. To it, I would like to add, when I was campaigning and I was running, I told the people that voted for me that I was going to present facts. When they asked me, at the time, they referred to me as Stacy, and some still do. What are you going to do to get people to vote in your favor. I said, I will present facts. That's what I'm going to do. The facts are, in the timeline that Commissioner Johnson just put before us, when we came back to the table on the 24th and the word inducement was used, those of you that look up the definition of inducement, it does in fact mean bribery. We were cautioned by our attorney several times to remove that. But as your cameras are rolling, you know that once something is out there, it is out there. Even if you scrub the internet, it can still be found. I could not comfortably vote for something that looked as though we were putting Augusta, Richmond County, as well as its citizens, in harm's way by accepting what could potentially be looked at as a bribery. The zone was given up. There was a panic. However, we were assured by the state Department of Health that there were things in place that would be assuring so that we would receive ambulatory care. When we came back to the table the next day, well, let me back up. In that same vein, on that same day, the 24th, I had a question that I needed to ask. But when I saw that Commissioner Johnson was asking a question of, can we negotiate? I was all for that. Because that's truly what I wanted to do. Let's negotiate these terms. It looked as though a contract had been passed, a counteroffer had been received, but we did not have the opportunity to properly come back to the table and present another counteroffer. That is how I viewed that. The zone was given up on the 24th. On the 25th, we came back to the table. There was a lot of emotions that were being passed. I was then able to ask the questions that I wanted to ask on the 24th. The citizens of Augusta, Richmond County and my district, some of them are split on this vote. Do they want to keep our current service provider or do they want a new one? But what all of them echo is we want accountability.